Welcome to Heart of a Shepherd. We are continuing our study in the book of Numbers. The title of our devotional today, Sin in the Camp. Put it out. Numbers chapter 4 and chapter 5. Well, with our study today, it focuses on the first census. Now, it details the number of men in 3 Levite families and their responsibilities regarding the tabernacle and its vessels. So the focus of this census now is upon the tribe of Levi. And so I invite you to notice with me in Numbers chapter 4, the Levites, their number, and responsibilities. Now, the Lord instructed Moses and Aaron to count the males aged 30 to 50 in verses 2 and 3 from 3 Levite families and assign them responsibilities related to their ministries. Now, the first family sect or group would have been the Kohathites. We find them recorded verses 1 through 20. Now, the Kohathites, whose males numbered 2,750 men between the ages of 30 and 50 years old, were assigned the most honorable duty of the Levite tribes. Their task was to transport the holy items associated with the sacrifices and worship of the God of Israel. Now, before the Kohathites could carry the holy and sanctified vessels, the priests were to cover and protect them from being looked upon or treated irreverently in verses 5 and 6. The Kohathites were charged with carrying for transporting the veil of the holy place, the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread along with its instruments and vessels, the golden lampstand with its instruments, and the golden altar and vessels. Now, because those items represented the holiest task of the priest, only Aaron and his sons were permitted to view them and not die, according to verse 20. And then the Gershonites, verses 21 through 28 of chapter 4. Now, the males of Gershon, like those earlier, were to be aged 30 to 50, and they too were numbered and found to be 2,630. Now, although their tasks were essential, their service to the tabernacle was considered less honorable than that of the Kohathites. They were responsible for transporting the draperies, hangings, badger skins that covered the tabernacle. And then the Merathites, verses 29 through 45. Their males numbered 3,200 men who were again aged 30 and to 50 years of age. Now, their task was transporting the wood that framed the sanctuary, including the boards, the bars, the pillars, and the sockets. Now, understand, these 3 families, every time Israel was to move, their responsibility was to take down the tabernacle and its outer fencing area, the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. Their responsibility was to take it down, to cover the holy things, and then to transport them as Israel moved forward in their journey. Now, when they arrived at the place that the Holy Spirit, God led for them to stop, they would then put back up the tabernacle and all of its furnishings. Now think about it. This continued for 40 years of wandering. Now, the earlier census of the 12 tribes that was recorded in Numbers chapter 1 and 2 counted able-bodied men aged 20 and older. However, in Numbers chapter 4, Levite males aged 30 to 50 were numbered. Now, the difference in the census age of the 12 tribes and the Levites was not explained. But I believe, this is my opinion, that the Lord required wisdom of years and physical strength for those who served him and assisted the priests in their duties. And then consider with me Numbers chapter 5. Here we have 3 topics: disease, restitution, and adultery. Now, in Numbers chapter 5, the focus on specific steps for how to address leprosy, disease, and restitution when one was harmed and also the sin of adultery, verse 14, that we notice in Exodus 20. Now, the leprosy and disease, let's look at that in the first 4 verses. So God required his people to be clean, holy, and disease-free. Now, consequently, leprosy, oozing skin conditions, and contact with the dead body were considered unclean. Individuals were removed from the camp until healing and cleansing occurred. Now, this practice helped prevent the spread of disease and illness to other families. And then we have a principle on fraud and restitution, verses 5 through 10. And so if a person defrauded another, restitution and an additional fifth part, or 20%, of the loss suffered must be added. And so no sacrifice was acceptable to the Lord without first confessing one's sins and restoring the damage another had suffered. Only then could a man bring an offering to the altar. You might want to consider Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 through 25. And there we're taught as a man would come to the temple to worship, that before he could give a gift to the Lord, he was to leave his gift and go and be reconciled to his brother, reconciled to someone he had offended. But the basis of that is found here in Numbers chapter 5 and verse 8. Now, in instances where a man was harmed and died, and with no next of kin, the offender was to present the restitution of his wrong to the priest, which would be kept by him. Kept by who? Kept by the priest. And then consider the sin of adultery, verses 11 through 31. Now, because God had instituted marriage as a holy covenant between a man and a woman, Israel was to be intolerant of adultery in their midst, verses 11 through 13. Now, should a woman be suspected of adultery and there were no witnesses, a jealous husband was required to bring his wife to the priest along with a jealousy offering. Now, the priest was tasked with the responsibility of setting the accused woman before the Lord, and he questioned her guilt or innocence concerning adultery. Now, that's recorded verses 17 through 21. Now, should the woman assert her innocence, the priest warned her with an oath of cursing, that is, an oath that she would be cursed if she was lying, and reminded her, this woman accused of adultery, that she would bring a curse upon herself should she be guilty. Now, the priest would then call upon the Lord in verse 21 to make her, this woman, her thigh to rot and her belly to swell. Now, the outward manifestation of abdominal distension, swelling, was a clear sign of her guilt. Likewise, if she was innocent, she could drink the water, which would have no effect. However, the Lord allowed her belly to swell from its impurities. This woman accused of adultery would be cursed among her people, verse 27, and the priest would execute upon her all this law, verse 30. Well, closing thoughts. How jealous was the Lord concerning the sanctity of marriage between one man and one woman? Well, in verse 10 of Leviticus chapter 20, we read, "The adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." So once again, we're reminded of the sanctity of marriage. It is a sacred, it is a holy institution between one man and one woman. And you know, even though the culture has changed around us, I can assure you that God's heart and God's mind has not changed. If you're married, cleave to your spouse and love them. If you're not married, pray that God would, in His will and His timing, bring your way someone that would share your value concerning marriage and how sacred it is in the eyes of a God who is holy. Well, thank you for being a part of our study. Looking forward to continue our search and focus in the book of Numbers. God bless, and bye-bye.